A very good afternoon to you, Statistician-General. Now, the GDP increased at an annualized rate of 6.3%, and this is between October and December. But what is the whole picture when we look at the annual GDP figures? Are you with us?
Well, for starters, Tabi, we are saying that this quarter...
Please go ahead. So we seem to have a slight delay between our questions and answers. Please do go ahead.
I can hear you clearly. But it doesn't seem like she was hearing me, Tammy, because when I tried to respond, she was talking like she can't hear me.
At first, Mr. Maluleke, I could not hear you, so let me pose that question to you once again. When we look at the GDP, it increased at an annualized rate of 6.3% between October and December. But what is the whole picture when we look at the annual GDP figures?
Certainly, Tammy, the fourth quarter brings in the entire year of 2020. And in this regard, for the entire year, the economy fell by 7%. And when we look at the industries that have actually recorded or have contributed the most in terms of the fall, it's all industries with an exception of agriculture and government. Government and agriculture grew positively and contributed positively. Agriculture contributed 0.3 percentage points and government contributed 0.1 percentage points. But these were not enough to offset the annual growth of -7%.
And where does the 6.3% figure sit in relation to the other quarters?
When we look at the previous quarters, let us look at the first 2 quarters of 2020, for example. We have seen a negative growth that came from the previous, or 2019. So for 4 quarters in a row until the second quarter of 2020, we had seen negative growth, which was the first time we saw that since 1991-92. And the third quarter of 2020 rose by 66% at the time. Now we have revised it to about 67.3%. And having revised it, then when we come to this quarter, this growth comes from a base that was emerging from a very low base. Let us look at second quarter, for example. We had fallen by 51%, and rising from that base had actually created a growth of about 67% as revised. Now, this one that we are seeing, the 6.3%, is coming in when things are now slowly returning to normal in the society, coming from a hard lockdown.
Beforehand, when you looked at the social development sector, that seemed to be performing quite well. Quite surprising that it actually doesn't feature as the sector that actually grew during this particular quarter.
Certainly, let us look at the government and the social services. All over time, even during the lockdown, both from the production and expenditure side, government and social services have shown some life, not always going into the negative. And if you look at what has happened, especially in the area of health and education, we have seen a lot of movements there in terms of the production side as well as the expenditure side in that direction. Even during your highest levels of alert levels of lockdown, government continued to be able to do some business.
Now, if we look closely during all the quarters of 2020, household expenditure on certain goods decreased due to perhaps the loss of income. But would you say that Q4 showed some change in that particular trend?
We have seen the highest growth coming out from hotels and restaurants on the expenditure side, that is households. But not only that, we have seen the biggest contribution actually came from restaurants and hotels. But also in the area of non-alcoholic beverages, we have seen larger contributions on household expenditure, but also growth. But if you look at other areas like clothing and footwear, as well as alcoholic beverages together with tobacco, we have seen a recovery. And this is because during the highest levels of lockdown, people could not access hotels and restaurants, people could not access alcoholic beverages as well as tobacco. And of course, the whole area of non-alcoholic beverages tend to have been faring very well even in previous quarters.
And in your view, what do the numbers say about expenditure on GDP in 2020?
Well, this is not my view, Tammy. It's what the numbers are saying. But what is happening is that generally in the year 2020, there has been a bit of a drop in areas of expenditure, in areas of durability. If you look at semi-durable goods, we have seen a bit of a drop, but generally in the whole areas of household expenditure, it has been slowly recovering based on the levels of lockdown that we are having in the country.
Provincially, how did each of the provinces perform in the last quarter? And this is particularly looking at the economic hub like Gauteng, for example.
The report that we are releasing on provinces is not actually looking at the last quarter. We don't release them quarter on quarter. We release them annually. And the one that we are making available now is for 2019, because you have to wait until all accounts are accounted for. Now, coming to the performance of the provinces, the highest performance was in Gauteng at 0.6%. It was followed by the Western Cape and followed by KwaZulu-Natal. But also we must remember the contribution of these three provinces to the national economy is relatively high. Actually, the three of them go beyond 50% in terms of their contribution to the national economy, with Gauteng leading at 34%, followed by KwaZulu-Natal at 16% and Western Cape at 14% as in contribution to the national economy. So when you have the three provinces that are driving more than 50% of your economy having shown a positive growth, it shows that your economy then in 2019 was recovering or was showing vibrancy, because the negative growth only started creeping in the fourth quarter of 2019 at the time at the national level.
Mr. Maluleke, thank you very much. We'll leave it at that for today. That's the Statistician-General, Mr. Risenga Maluleke, giving